The day I found the hotel receipt, my marriage cracked, but my future opened. His affair cost him $70,000, and it became the money that set me free. At last, mine. If this story helps you, please like, subscribe, and share. Your support brings strength and hope to someone listening today. I will never forget the weight of that little rectangle of paper. It hid in the lining of Mark's navy coat, a place I reached only to free a stuck zipper. The coat hung by our back door, where the sounds of the dishwasher, the ticking clock, and our dog's slow breathing could not drown out the calm in my body. I slid my fingers over the slick fabric, felt the edge, and eased it out. There it was. Printed lines, a logo I did not recognize, a hotel name, 2 nights, 1 room with a king bed. The date sat like a hard pit in my throat. It was the weekend he told me he was driving to his mother's to fix her gutters. You may think I screamed or cried or threw things. I did none of those. I folded the receipt, slipped it into my sweater pocket, and stood still until the dishwasher hummed louder. Then I rubbed the corners of my eyes the way I do when I am too tired to trust them. I am Anna. I am a school librarian. I am the mother of 2 good-hearted kids, Grace and Evan. I am not a woman who wanted a fight at the end of a workday. So I set the table. I checked homework. I stirred the pasta sauce and answered emails from parents about overdue books. I met the dog's brown eyes and scratched his ears. And I let myself breathe. Mark walked in late, smelling of cold air and coffee. He kissed my cheek in a way that felt like a breeze. He said, "Long day," and set his keys on the plate with the shells we collected from Lake Michigan. It always bothered me, the way the keys scratched the blue paint from those shells. That night, it bothered me less than usual. At dinner, Grace talked about her science fair project. Evan asked if he could try out for basketball. Mark nodded, tired. He said, "That's great, and we'll see." I watched his face as one watches a late cloud. It shifted in small ways. I knew those shifts. We have been married for 19 years. 19 winters of salt on our steps. 19 springs of raking last year's leaves. I knew the way his cheek moved when he told a lie. It did not move that night. It held still. I did not bring up the receipt. Instead, after the kids washed their dishes and went to their rooms, I stood by the sink and asked softly, "How is your mother?" Mark's head turned. He leaned on the counter. "She's good," he said. "She was worried about the roof. Rodents and such. I got the traps set." He reached for his glass of water. His eyes did not meet mine. "I'm going to bed early." When I was a child, my father taught me to listen to what people say and what they do not say. Truth has a sound, he told me. He was a quiet man who fixed clocks and grew tomatoes. He believed in small, careful motions. "Find the steady beats," he used to say. "They will lead you." That night, I heard the steady beat inside myself. It said, "Wait, learn, choose with care." I waited until Saturday morning when Mark took the kids to the store. Then I sat at our dining table and opened our joint credit card statements, which I kept in a neat stack. I always paid the bills. I found a charge to the hotel that matched the receipt. There were other charges I had not noticed before because they were buried among groceries and sports fees. A jewelry store across town, a restaurant too fancy for our budget, a flight to Denver that he told me was a work training. The dates formed a thread. My chest felt tight, but my hands stayed steady. I made a folder. I labeled it with today's date. I copied the statements. I printed the ones that were online. I wrote down the names of the places and the amounts. As I worked, I remembered our early years, the apartment near campus, the way we saved change in a jar for pizza on Fridays. We were so careful then, so hopeful. When the front door opened and the kids' voices filled the house, I closed the folder and slid it into the bottom drawer of the desk. I took a deep breath, stood up, and smiled at Evan's new basketball under his arm. "Looks good," I said. "I cannot wait to see you play. We had a busy weekend. Life rarely makes room for grief when you first need it to." I sat in the bleachers at Grace's choir concert and clapped. I watched Mark lean left, then right, searching for us in the crowd. He waved when our eyes met. He blew me a small kiss. I caught it in habit. I let it fall. On Monday, I called Ruth. She lives next door. She is a widow with a soft voice and the strong hands of a woman who has made pies and tended gardens for 60 years. Ruth came over after lunch with a loaf of bread wrapped in a towel. We sat at my table, the folder between us. I told her what I had found. I told her what I had not yet done. Ruth listened. She did not say, "Leave him." She did not say, "Stay." She folded her fingers and said, "I am sorry." Then she said, Anna, you will be okay. We talked for a long time. Ruth told me about her early marriage, about the year her husband lost his job, about the time he forgot her birthday because his mother was in the hospital, and she thought it meant he stopped loving her. It did not, she said. But sometimes forgetting is a choice. She looked at my face. What you do next will be yours. That week, I met with Mr. Carter, an attorney my colleague recommended. The waiting room smelled like lemon cleaner. A plant stretched toward the window. Mr. Carter was a calm man with clear eyes and a careful way of speaking. He asked me to tell him everything from the beginning, and I did. I showed him the folder. He looked through the pages. He circled amounts and wrote dates. He nodded and asked, "Do you feel safe at home?" I said I did. He asked, "Do you believe he will become violent if confronted?" I said no, Mark is not a violent man. He is proud. He is stubborn. He is a man who likes to be seen as good. Mr. Carter told me I had options. He explained marital waste and dissipation of assets, terms that felt like foreign coins in my hand. He said that if Mark used our shared funds for an affair, the court could account for that. He said we could ask for reimbursement. He said we do not need to strike or break. We need to document. He asked if I was ready to decide. I said I wanted to try to talk to Mark first. Mr. Carter nodded. If you do, stay calm, he said. Tell the truth. Ask for the truth back. That night, after the kids were in their rooms, I asked Mark to sit with me. We sat on the couch. The dog lay at my feet. I could feel his warmth and hear his breathing. I held the hotel receipt between my thumb and forefinger. I looked at Mark and said, "I found this." He took it and held it a long time. I watched his face. A lot can pass across a face in a small span. At last he said, "I can explain." He rubbed his temple. "I was there for work." He looked up. "You know that," I nodded. "I would like the truth," I said. "I do not want a story that will break later." Mark opened his mouth and closed it. He looked at the dog on the rug. He said, "It was a mistake." He said, "I am sorry." He said, "It did not mean anything." I felt my breath slow. "How long?" I asked. "A few months," he said. He avoided my eyes. "She works at the other office." "It is over. Which weekend?" I asked. He told me. It was the same weekend on the receipt. "I was lonely," he said. "We have been tired." "We have been busy," I said. "But we take care of each other. We take care of the kids. I have always believed we tell the truth." "Did you pay for gifts? Did you take trips?" He nodded once, quick and small. "I am sorry," he said. I held the space between us in my hands, as if it were a glass bowl I was moving from one shelf to another. I said, "We can go to counseling. If there is to be any chance, we need complete honesty, a clean break, full access to everything." I asked him to write a message to her, right then, ending it. I asked him to agree to counseling. I asked for passwords, for the credit card I did not know he had opened. He nodded. He typed a message on his phone and showed me, "This is over. I will not contact you again." He handed me login information. He cried I did not. I set it all in the bowl that lived in my mind, and I carried it to a safe place to consider. We went to counseling. We met a careful therapist named Denise. There were good sessions and hard ones. We talked about the old injuries that made this wound feel huge. We talked about the years when our lives revolved around the kids, how we forgot to give each other fresh attention. We talked about Mark's pride at work and his fear of failure, about my habit of doing everything so nothing would fall apart. A month passed, then 2. During that time, Mark was kind. He came home earlier. He washed the dishes without being asked. He laughed with the children. He took me to a movie. He held my hand. On a Tuesday, I found a charge to the same hotel on our card. It sat there, a red mark in the ledger of my hope. That night, Mark fell asleep on the couch. I opened his phone. The message thread with her showed a new plan for Thursday night. She sent a picture of a wine glass on a white tablecloth. It was not graphic. It was not obscene. It was enough. I took a screenshot and sent it to my email. In the morning, I told him to pack a bag and stay with his brother for a week. I said, "We need space. The kids will not be told details yet." "You can say we are taking time to think," he argued. He cried. He said he was ashamed. He said he made a mistake and then made it again. I said, "You need to leave for now." He went. I told Ruth that evening in a whisper on my back steps. I cried into her shoulder while our dog pressed against my knees. I called Mr. Carter the next day. We made a plan. He told me to keep my tone even and my facts clear. "Let the truth do the work," he said. I told the kids we were taking some time to figure out some grown-up problems. Grace looked at me with her steady eyes and said, "Are you and Dad okay?" I said, "We will be okay, whatever we decide." Evan sat close to me and leaned his head on my arm. We watched a movie together, and I answered questions only when they asked. I did not make Mark into a villain. I did not make myself into a saint. We were two parents who needed to make things right for two children we loved more than anything. Mark wanted to come back after a week. I told him we were moving to a formal separation. He fought. He said I was punishing him. I said, "I am protecting myself." I said, "We will talk through lawyers now." He laughed in that sharp way he had when he was hurt. But he agreed to meet in mediation. The month that followed felt like winter stretching on longer than anyone wanted. I worked, I packed lunches. I fixed leaky faucets. I kept records. I opened a new bank account in my name and moved my paycheck there. Mr. Carter recommended a financial counselor who taught me to make a budget that could survive storms. "You will be okay," the counselor said. "Because you are learning. Because you are not alone." On a soft gray morning, we sat across from each other at a long table in a room with inoffensive art on the walls. The mediator, a woman with neat hair, opened a folder and smiled politely. Mr. Carter sat at my side, his pen ready. Mark's attorney, a man in a brown jacket, cleared his throat. Mark kept his eyes on the table. My heart rate was steady. We agreed on simple things first. We made a schedule for the children that gave them stability. We decided the dog would stay with the kids full-time because moving him back and forth would be hard. Mark and I both smiled at that. The mediator watched our faces and checked boxes on her forms. Then we came to money. Mr. Carter slid the folder forward. "We are asking the court to account for dissipation of marital assets," he said. "As outlined in these documents, the total of non-marital spending associated with the affair is $70,000. My client is requesting reimbursement. We would prefer to resolve this here." Mark's head lifted fast. "70,000, he said? That cannot be right." I kept my voice soft. "It was overtime," I said. "You know it was," he shook his head. He turned to his lawyer. "This is absurd," he said. "She is trying to ruin me." I looked at him and I let him see my face. Not angry, not cruel, but firm. "I am not trying to ruin you," I said. "I am trying to make right what was made wrong. This is not punishment. This is balance." The mediator asked to see the documents. We went through them line by line. There were plane tickets. There were 2 watches, a necklace, dinners, hotels, payments for a rental cabin near a lake. There were cash withdrawals the same days as those dinners. There was a loan from our home equity line with no receipts for a repair. The dates matched messages. The amounts matched the places. I had not drawn lines that were not there. I had done my homework with care. Mark's lawyer requested a break. Mark looked at me and said, in a tone that reminded me of the early days when he was very sure of his plans, "We can do this without bringing numbers into it. I can make it up to you in other ways." "The numbers are part of the truth," I said. "We need the truth to be part of what fixes this." We returned to the table after 10 minutes. Mark's lawyer said we were overestimating. Mr. Carter stayed calm. He asked for receipts from their side to explain the cash. There were none. He asked for alternate explanations that were not connected to the affair. There were none that held. The mediator made notes. It was quiet. I did not gloat. I did not point and say, "See?" I was busy keeping my heart slow and my breath even. When you hold a line, you do it not by shouting, but by standing where you need to stand. The mediation lasted all day. We ate sandwiches with dry bread and free apples. We spoke about the house. We spoke about retirement accounts. We spoke about summer plans for the children. In the late afternoon, when the light shifted to that color that makes everything look honest, the mediator said, "If both parties agree that $70,000 of marital funds were used for purposes unrelated to the marriage, and there is documentation supporting this, then yes, the court would likely consider a reimbursement or an unequal division to account for that. If you resolve it here, you save time and stress. Do you want to keep going toward agreement?" Mark looked at the table. He said nothing for a while. Then he nodded. "Fine," he said, tired. "We will do it." I felt something gentle move through my body, like a breeze through a field. This was the moment I had been walking toward with careful steps. Our revenge, if you want to call it that, was not the hurt of another. It was the restoration of balance. It was the refusal to be made small. The agreement took 2 more sessions to finalize. In the end, Mark kept his retirement account. I kept the house with a refinance that put it in my name and adjusted for the equity. He paid $70,000 to my account as part of the settlement, noted as compensation for dissipation. We planned a schedule for the kids that gave them both parents in a predictable rhythm. We agreed not to speak badly about one another to the children. We shook hands and we both cried a little. I told Ruth the news that afternoon. She put her warm hand over mine and said, "Fair is fair." She smiled. "Now you build what you need." I did. The first thing I did was take a breath that reached all the way down. I made a list, not a rushed one with scratched out lines, but a clean one. It had 3 sections: home, work, future. Under home, I wrote, repair the porch steps, paint the front room, plant tomatoes, fix the sag in the gate, keep the family photos but move some of them. Under work, I wrote, apply for the library specialist certificate, ask for more hours next fall, plan a family reading night for our school. Under future, I wrote, save 6 months of expenses, set aside for kids' college, take Grace to see the ocean when she graduates, teach Evan to roast a chicken, learn to kayak. I called our credit union and set up an account. I labeled security. I moved a chunk of the $70,000 there. Mr. Carter had warned me about big purchases that might leave me thin. Make choices that help you sleep, he said. So I did. I chose to fix the roof before it failed and put a responsible down payment aside if I ever needed to move. I chose to set up a college savings account for each child. I chose to fund 3 classes for my certificate. I signed up for evenings twice a week. The classes were taught in a cheerful room at the community college, and I was often the oldest student there. I did not mind. I raised my hand when I had questions. I brought oatmeal cookies to share on the last night. I took home a binder full of notes and a heart that felt smarter than it did a month before. One Saturday, I brought Grace to the hardware store. We picked a pale blue for the front room. Evan came along, complicated and sweet at 12, and he chose a brighter color for his model plane shelf. We ate hot dogs from the cart by the door and talked about nothing of great weight. Do hot dogs taste better outside? Which paint roller leaves fewer marks? It was a day covered in small blessings. When we got home, we put on music and painted until our arms ached. The room bloomed into a new space. At night, I sat on the couch and looked around. The walls looked like a morning sky. Mark adjusted to the new rhythm. He called each night when the kids were here. He asked about homework. He came on time to pick them up and in time to drop them off again. He asked me once if we could try again. I could see that he meant it. This is the part where some people ask me why not. The answer is quiet. Trust is a long bridge. If it burns down, you do not always want to rebuild in the same place. You walk until you find a safer crossing. I told him no. I said it with care. He cried. I cried after he left. Then I made tea and sat with the dog in the room I painted and told myself the truth. I had chosen my life. I would make it a good one. In spring, my certificate arrived. I framed it and hung it near my desk. My principal called me into her office and offered me a lead role in our literacy program. It came with a small raise and a sense of honor that mattered more to me than I can say. I planned our school's first family reading night and watched parents and children sit close and read aloud under strings of white lights. When a kindergartner climbed into his grandmother's lap with a stack of books and fell asleep on page 3, I stood in the doorway and felt my heart hold him with a warmth I cannot describe. The $70,000 did not sit as a story of loss. It became lines in a ledger of hope. I used part to replace our aging furnace before winter. I used part to buy a used car for me that did not need a prayer to start on cold mornings. I used part to take Grace and Evan to a state park where a calm lake mirrored the sky and we rented a canoe for an hour. We paddled in a quiet triangle and laughed when the dog put his paw on the side and barked at a turtle. We ate peanut butter sandwiches on a log. Evan skipped stones. Grace took pictures of the sun on the water. In the months that followed, life made a pattern that was not what I had imagined when I stood under an arch of white flowers 19 years earlier, but it was mine and it was good. I sat at the kitchen table with bills and envelopes and did not feel dread. The electric company's letter came and went without drama. The groceries were paid for by money I knew was in my account. I met with the financial counselor twice more, and we made a timeline. It is not glamorous, he said with a smile, but it is peace. One evening in early summer, after I watered the tomatoes and made sure the gate latched, Mark came by to drop off Evan's cleats, which had been left in the back of his car. He stood on the porch and looked past me into the painted room. He cleared his throat. "It looks nice," he said. "Thank you," I said. We did it together. He looked at me in a way I had not seen in a long time, as if he were trying to see the person he had once stood beside with joy. He said, "I am sorry, Anna. I am sorry for what I did. I am sorry for how I hurt you." "I cannot undo it," I nodded. "I know," I said. "Thank you for saying it." We stood a long time without words. The late light made shadows on the porch. The dog lay at my feet and thumped his tail against the boards. Finally, I said, "We will be okay." I meant it. If you are listening and you are at the beginning of this kind of story, you may be looking for the part where I burned his clothes or shouted in a restaurant or posted messages online. I did not do those things. Rage would have taken what I needed most from me: my steadiness, my respect for myself, my ability to be the mother my children needed. My justice was collected by slow steps and a stack of paper. It was not flashy. It was fair. It changed my life. A year after the mediation, Grace sang at her graduation. She wore a simple dress and a smile that made me tear up. After the ceremony, we took pictures under an oak tree. Mark stood beside me, and we had one picture taken with all of us, because that is what you do when a family changes shape but remains a family. He stood a respectful distance away. Later, when we waved at him as he drove off, Evan asked, "Are you happy, Mom?" And I said, "Yes, I am." That summer, I used a small part of the settlement to drive to the ocean with Grace. We left at dawn in our reliable car. We packed sandwiches and listened to podcasts about birds. Grace told me about her plans. We laughed at silly billboards and slept in a motel that smelled like salt and old wood. We reached the shore as evening came down like a blessing. We stood with our feet in the foam and looked at the horizon. "It is so big," she said. "It is," I said. I thought about the first day I found the receipt and about how small my world felt then. I looked at my daughter's face in the soft light and knew that our world was not small anymore. On the drive home, I thought about the woman on the other side of the affair. I did not think of her with hate. I did not know her. She was part of a choice that belonged to Mark. I hoped she found a better way to seek what she needed. I hoped we all did. Back at home, I added a new line to my list under future: teach Grace how to change a tire before she goes to college. We went out to the driveway on a Saturday with the manual and the jack and laughed until we cried when we could not get one lug nut off. Ruth came over with a can of oil and a bar, and between the three of us, we did it. We stood in the sun and cheered the small victory. Evan took pictures and made a face like a news anchor when he announced, "Local heroes change a tire." As the months folded into another year, Mark chose to sell his fancy watch to help pay off his own debts. He told me this without asking for pity. We were two people who shared children and a history and the wish for each other to be okay. He started seeing a counselor on his own. He began to run in the mornings. He told me once that he had learned that shame is heavy, but it does not make anyone better on its own. Responsibility does, I agreed. Life is made of mornings and evenings, of lists and laughter, of walls painted new and roofs that do not drip, of children who grow taller while you watch. It is also made of the decisions we make when we are hurt. I wanted to be someone my children could look at and see courage that did not snarl. I wanted them to know that justice does not have to be loud to be real. One night, after the kids had gone to their fathers for the weekend, I sat in the quiet house with a cup of tea and a stack of receipts from the home improvement store. I thought about my father's advice, about the steady beats. I thought about the way Ruth had held my hand. I thought about Mr. Carter, patient with his pen. I thought about the way the mediator looked at me with the clear eyes of someone who has watched many couples choose their next path. I smiled at the way the dog snored. I closed my eyes and thanked the version of myself who chose to take the harder, calmer road. People ask sometimes what I bought with the $70,000, as if the story is better when there is something shiny at the end. I tell them I bought time. I bought safety. I bought a roof that does not leak in heat that runs in winter. I bought a calm mind. I bought a future that feels like a room I can paint any color I like. I do not hate Mark. I do not love him as I once did. I love the way we work together for our children. I love that I do not feel small in my own house. I love that Grace is learning to choose kindness and strength in equal measure. I love that Evan tries new things without fear of shame. I love that I can tell this story now without my voice shaking. If you are in your own hard place, you do not need to do anything dramatic to gain back your life. You need to find the truth, hold it steady, and let it lead you. You need to tell someone you trust. You need to write dates and times and be patient. You need to ask for help. We do not earn hard times. We do not deserve them. But we can decide what we build after. There was a day, almost 2 years to the minute from the afternoon I pulled a receipt from a coat lining, when I drove to the community college to speak at their evening class. The teacher, Mrs. Hill, had asked me to share about libraries and bringing families to books. I stood before the room and saw older students and younger ones, tired faces and eager ones. I spoke about small steps, how a book on a table, a note sent home in simple language, a snack beside a chair, can change a family's night. After class, a woman in a green sweater came up to me. She said, "I almost did not come tonight. I am going through something." But your voice felt like a hand on a railing. I did not ask her for details. I said, "I am glad you came." I meant it with my whole life. On the second anniversary of my separation, Grace brought home a plant in a pot she painted blue. "For the front room," she said. We set it on the table between the 2 chairs that catch the afternoon sun. The dog came and sniffed it, thought better, and went back to his spot. Evan walked in with a bag of groceries, and we made a simple meal together. We set the table, and when we sat down, we held hands, just the 3 of us, and said a quiet thank you to the day. I have learned that some betrayals are not the end of love in our lives. They are the end of a version of it. When I look at photographs of our wedding, I do not feel foolish. I feel young. I feel pleased for the girl in the white dress who did her best, who made a family, who learned to tell the truth even when her voice wanted to run. I feel proud of the woman she became when she chose to walk herself into a better life with grace and clean hands. There is a last piece I will share, not because it is dramatic, but because it is true. One afternoon, while I was cleaning the garage, I found the coat. The navy one with the broken zipper. It hung on a nail. Dust had settled on the shoulders like fine frost. I took it down. I ran my fingers along the lining, feeling nothing but fabric. I laughed a little at myself. Then I held the coat and felt the weight of it. I almost carried it to the trash. Instead, I washed it. I folded it and put it in the box of winter things for donation. Someone would wear it next. It would warm some other shoulders. The coat did not know our story. It did not owe me anything, and I did not owe it. Letting go is not always a speech. Sometimes it is a box on a shelf with a coat inside, ready to go to someone who needs it. I locked the garage and walked back into the house I had kept and made new. I ran my hand along the wall we painted and felt the slight texture. I thought of the girl I had been and the woman I am. I poured a glass of water. I took it to the front steps. The tomatoes were large and green, the vines tied to their stakes. A breeze moved. I heard a small laugh from next door, where Ruth sat with a friend and a deck of cards. I waved, she waved back. We did not need words. The steady beats were all around us. Life goes on in steps. Mine led me through a courtroom and a classroom, through a painted room and a porch in the evening light. They led me to a bank office where a kind woman helped me open accounts that carried my name. They led me to the edge of the ocean, where I stood with my daughter and felt the scale of sobering and beautiful things. They led me home where the dog knows the sound of my car and the kids shout, "Mom!" before I have a chance to put my bag down. There is a verse my grandmother kept in a frame by her sewing machine. It was not religious. It said, "Do the next right thing." I think about it often. The next right thing when I found the receipt was not to throw it at Mark's face. It was to breathe and gather facts. The next right thing when the truth fell out was not to bait him into a fight, but to ask for counseling and clarity. The next right thing when the counseling fell apart was not to poison the children against their father, but to give them the safety of a simple story. We are making changes. We love you. The next right thing in mediation was to speak with numbers and keep my voice even. And the next right thing after the settlement was to build a life I could trust. If you crave a happy ending, here is mine. Peace in my house, laughter at my table, work that matters, children who know they are loved, and an account with enough to turn the lights on. If you crave justice, here it is. A man who learned hard lessons and paid the ledger he had drawn down without right. A woman who did not shrink. If you crave a lesson, I have none to preach. I have only the image of a small bowl in a pair of hands, carried carefully from one shelf to another, holding something fragile and necessary. You move slowly with it. You do not jostle. You keep your eye on where you are going. And when you set it down on the safe shelf, you let your hands rest before you reach for what comes next. Sometimes I still wake at night and replay conversations. This is human. I let the thoughts pass like cars on a street. I get up and make tea and sit in the quiet room. I think about choices. I think about the line from the shore to the horizon. I think about the list on my fridge. Home, work, future. I add small items. Change the air filter before September. Teach Evan how to sew a button. Buy more cinnamon. Invite Ruth for pie. Call Mark about Evan's math test. Check Grace's oil change. Thank the people who stood with me. A life remade is not a loud thing. It is the gentle rhythm of small steps done with care, a steady beat you learn to trust. If a person hurt you, and you see how to set things right, you do not need to sharpen your words into knives. You can sharpen your pencils instead. You can write down what happened. You can walk into an office with your folder and speak in a calm voice. You can ask for fairness. You can receive it. You can use it to build a life that belongs to you. The night before Grace left for college, she asked to sleep in my room like she did when she was little, and storm scared her. We lay there, two women in a soft pool of lamplight, and talked about the kind of future we both wanted. She asked me if I was scared when I found the receipt. I was, I said. But I was more sure than scared. She turned and smiled in the half-dark. I am glad you were sure, she said. So am I said. We slept. In the morning, we loaded the car. Evan pretended he was not sad, but when we hugged, his shoulders shook. Mark drove up and put a box of notebooks in the trunk and touched my arm. We did okay, he said. We did, I said. I watched Grace go with the kind of happy sadness that lets your heart fill without bursting. Later that day, I cleaned her room in small circles with a dust cloth and put a vase of flowers by the window. I made a casserole and sent a picture to my sister of the clean room. She wrote back, "New chapter." I wrote, "Yes, this is that chapter." It began with a small piece of paper pulled from a coat. It passed through rooms with beige walls and long tables. It walked along a shoreline and through a library with children reading on a carpet like stars. It is not finished. It will carry me into the next good things I cannot name yet. When I think about the $70,000, I do not see stacks of bills. I see a bridge across a difficult river. I see my hands on the rail. I see the clean steps forward. I am not extraordinary. I am a person who learned to be brave in ways that look ordinary. Asking for help, keeping records, speaking calmly, telling the truth, making soup, painting a wall, teaching a child to hold a book or a wrench. If you need to know how to go on, you do not need more than that. Everything else will find you. And when the day ends and the house is quiet, I open the window and let fresh air in. It smells like earth and cut grass, like the neighbor's dryer sheet, like rain on pavement far down the block. I turn off the lamp and sit in the dusk. I listen to the steady beats that led me here. Then I stand up, close the window, and go to bed in a house that is safe. I dream of calm water and bright mornings. I wake to them, and I am grateful.